Payroll runs the world, and behind every paycheck is the state-of-the-art technology. This Global Payroll Week, Neeyamo proudly presents a special limited series, the Payroll Tech Toast. Join us as we toast the people, the passion, and the cutting-edge technology shaping payroll around the globe.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Global Payroll Week podcast, the Payroll Tech Toast. I'm your host, Nancy, and today we're raising a toast to the next era of payroll, an era where payroll is no longer behind the scenes, it's leading the charge in shaping global business success. In this episode, we're diving into what it takes to thrive in this new era, where influence matters, innovation leads, and payroll professionals are redefining what leadership looks like in a rapidly changing world. And to help us navigate the shift, I'm thrilled to welcome Bart Vanderstorm, a global payroll pioneer and author of The Payroll Minds. So grab your favorite brew and let's step into the future because payroll isn't just evolving, it's entering a whole new era. Let's get started. But I would like to begin the podcast with a very personal question, which would be what inspired you to write your book? Was there a specific moment or a gap in the industry you wanted to address?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. And it's around the same reason why I started my company. I felt like two things. I've been in the industry for 25 years, always being self-employed, always helping clients as an individual contributor. But I said, listen, we need to build a company that's going to help the global world making payroll simple. That was my first thing I wanted to achieve. So ensure that there's one organization focusing on one real vision, which is payroll should be simple. And the other reason was that, whilst I was working with so many people across different companies, I've always come across so many talented people who did not really have an idea, how to navigate their careers, how to elevate their careers, where to go in order to get the best career path. And so I said, if two things I can achieve with building my own company is one, making payroll simple, and two, becoming an incubator for payroll talent to learn faster, quicker, and get more exposure and opportunity. And 5 years later, that's exactly what we've done, and we're still embarking on. So,
What's one book besides your own that every payroll leader should read?
So obviously, there's a new book out now from Max from the Klis, who's another Dutchie. So we're friends, and he's written a great book. And I would say, a book that is about negotiation. So any book that helps you influence, negotiate, etc., is one that I would recommend. There's not one that necessarily comes to mind, unfortunately. Otherwise, I could have given you the title. But a book that helps you negotiate is one that I would strongly recommend.
Transformation often starts with technology, right? So, how do you think people and the mindset could play a role in shaping the future of payroll?
Yeah, I must admit, Nancy, I'm a little bit on the fence of, I don't think transformation should started by technology. I think it's the opposite. But I think many organizations make the mistake to believe that the transformation starts with the technology. In my mind, the transformation starts with determining, how you want to organize yourself, where you want to put the roles and responsibilities, how you want the process to look, where you want the processes to be conducted from. And that will drive your requirements towards technology. But clearly the technology element of the transformation is the big differentiator. Yeah. But the design of your organization, the design of your procedures dictate your requirements for the technology. So in my opinion, when you are dealing with these questions, don't ask yourself which tool you want to use, ask which tool you need to use. And so I'll give you an example. If you choose a global vendor that does not provide any services, but you want to globalize your organization and therefore you need more services because you're not going to be locally everywhere, then you need to select yourself a vendor that provides you the technology and the services. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck. And so that's just an example. And I think it's something that any organization, anyone dealing with the same question, should ask themselves those questions first.
So you back to differ, saying that transformation starts with processes and people.
That's exactly what I think is the case. Yes.
Okay, brilliant. What are some of the most surprising ways you've seen payroll evolve over the past few years that you absolutely didn't expect of?
Well, the most fabulous things I've seen were things I were expecting, but I was expecting them not to go as fast as they actually went. But I think the tools that are being provided in the marketplace that are called Global Payroll Control Center, Global Payroll Control tools, etc. It's all about being able to navigate in an easy manner data between your HR and your benefits providers towards payroll in a automated fashion, and where in the middle, it's called a bit of middleware, in the middle the data is being narrated, the data is being enriched, the data is being translated, and the mapping tables are translating the data into the needs of the local payroll provider or the global payroll provider. That technology itself, I think, has really elevated over the last couple of years, and I think it's now to a point where it's moving so fast that because of it, the world of payroll is becoming more easier, more simpler, just because of that. So remember, when I was younger, not old, but when I was younger, I had to do all of that manually, and Excel was not even as sophisticated as it is today. So it was typically, moving data from one system to another was really a very tedious job. And I still think it is tedious for some organizations who do not use technology, but for those companies that use technology now know that this is just a matter of minutes instead of days. And that is a massive, massive improvement.
How do you think payroll is important in managing risk and resilience? Like, what role does payroll even play in that?
Yeah. So I think risk and resilience, I like the word resilience. So what I think many organizations don't realize is that when you don't pay your people, and I'm not saying the payroll people, but when you don't pay your people in your organization, you don't pay them on time, you don't pay them accurately, or there's issues, it has an immediate effect on your organization. So yes, black and white, if you don't pay people, nobody comes to work. So that's really something that damages your organization. Everybody understands that. But the morale of your people, the ability for you to retain your people, the ability to ensure that the people come to work with a sense of fulfillment lies in the fact that you have to pay them fairly, accurately, and timely. And whatever that means is obviously dependent on which location and which area of the world you are at. But still, I believe it's important to pay everybody fairly, because most people work for the pay they get. And the pay they get is extremely important for the rest of their life, meaning their children, their school tuitions, their rents, their mortgages, everything is dependent on the employer paying on time and accurately and fairly. So for me, that's, if you just take that in one word, it means is at the forefront of that activity. And if you don't get the process right, if you don't treat your payroll people right, if you don't listen to them, then you're going to get a lot of issues if you're not careful.
I'd like to believe that payroll is moving closer to the C-suite. So, do you see a future where organizations could appoint somebody like a chief payroll officer?
Well, I don't see it coming, but I can say that I do believe that leadership of an organization starts to realize and starts to recognize that actually listening to those payroll folk is very beneficial to everybody. I do believe that the payroll organization, the leader of the payroll, should have a place within the governance. But whether that is in a C level, I think, C-level people, they have a multitude of portfolio of decisions they have to make. And I think payroll necessarily either should be represented by finance or by HR. I prefer to be within HR, but that's a different discussion for another day. On the other hand, just an anecdote, guys. So I was the executive vice president of an organization, and I could literally not make any decision. And I was the payroll manager at another organization, and I could make any decision. And the company sizes were also bigger. So where I was a manager, I could make all the decisions, and where in a smaller company where I was the vice president, I could not make any decisions. So a title is also one thing. So if you read my book, if you get a chance, you'll see that I really have a couple of chapters in there that says, how do you gain influence into your organization? And how do you ensure that you have a seat at the table? And I believe that should be your first aim, whether you are C-suite or whether you're SVP or VP. To be honest, it doesn't really matter as long as somebody listens to you.
Okay, I'll make sure I read your book. How do you think payroll teams can partner more effectively with HR, finance, and IT to become drivers of organizational agility?
Yeah. So again, my book, but I won't go to my book again. But in my opinion, first thing you need to make sure of is that you drive consistent meetings with finance and HR. And second of all, I think you need to drive the discussions about factual information. So it's not about, hey, Nancy, remember last month you made this mistake with this employee and now you did it again and I'm done with this. That's not a factual discussion. A factual discussion is, last month we had 4 or 5 missing information for 5 or 6 people. This month it's 2. It's still not acceptable. What are we going to do about it? So be factual, be clear, and make clear agreements about what's going to happen. And what I think happens between a lot of organizations and a lot of functions within organizations is that people work with each other daily. They like each other. They go to lunch together. They may be even friends outside of the workplace, and therefore calling each other, calling the accountability on each other is a bit uncomfortable. But I think and I guess it does. But from my perspective, ensuring that you are very factual on what's the situation and making sure you have clear agreement on who's going to do what by when is already making a massive change in the actual discussion. And I think if you as payroll drive this, or anyone in the organization, whether it's finance or HR, if somebody drives this way, you'll move forward and you'll fix the issues that need to be fixed.
Bart, tell us if there are any metrics. If so, what metrics should payroll leaders track to demonstrate their strategic value to the business?
So obviously, payroll accuracy is an extremely important metric. But the question is, what gets you ultimately to a payroll accuracy metric? So I'll give you one example. If you agree with your payroll vendor that you're going to have a payroll accuracy of 99.5%, but it doesn't talk about when this 99.5% needs to be achieved, you can be in a situation where you provide your payroll vendor with correct information, but the payroll vendor has some issues or they make mistakes, and you capture those mistakes, you correct those mistakes, and then ultimately the result is still the same. It's 99.5%. So you could say, hey, the payroll vendor might say, hey, kudos to me, I've done a good job. Yes, it is. But the question is, what was the work that needed to be done in order to get it there? So I think a pre and during and post payroll accuracy metric is what drives the story. So if you can say, our data we sent had issues, and then whilst the data was being processed, another additional issues were created, but then we fixed all those issues prior to sending it out, then at least we can tell 3 different stories. One is we did a good job because everybody got paid. 2 is we have to improve on the process between us and the payroll vendor, and 1 is we need to do a better job sending better data. And so I think if you divide it in that way, you'll be able to tell the story, whatever the story is.
Can you tell us a few new skills that payroll professionals will need in order to stay relevant?
Well, relevant, I think, is a bit too strong word, Nancy. I think payroll people will always be relevant. And especially, in the next couple of 20 years, I don't see it changing so rapidly. But I think if anyone, especially when you're a bit younger, but also for people that want just a second chance in their career, I think data analytics and data design And a little bit of tool engineering is something that I definitely like people to learn. And the reason is, AI, the robot that use generative AI, they don't act by themselves. You have to actually build them. And so learning to code, learning to understand different codes, learning to understand different language codes is I think a critical key element of how you develop yourself. And on top of it, even if you know how to write code, you also need to understand a little bit of Excel and formulas. And so those two together really drive analytical skills, which I think is going to be the next gen of payroll, on top of project management and communication skills, for sure.
How do you think organizations can create career growth paths in payroll that attract the next generation of talent?
Yeah, first of all, I think any organization needs to always think about where are all my payroll people. So think about it in a very black and white perspective. One company has all their employees locally, one employee per country running the payroll, and another company has hubs. So 3 hubs, one central hub with let's say 50% of the people, and 2 decentralized hubs with 25% of the people. You can imagine that if you're part of a team, it's easier to have a career path than when you are a single contributor and you're by yourself in a country. So I think if you want to have people grow a career, having the teams be together, giving them the opportunity to teach each other, to show each other, and to learn with each other, I think already is a big step. I believe it's important for any organization to promote from within. So typically what happens is that many organizations hire people from outside, which may seem logical because, there may be skills that you need. But I would always encourage organizations to have a healthy balance between finding people from outside and helping people to learn and to educate themselves from the inside. And I think if you do those two and keep everybody happy, that doesn't mean they don't have to work hard, doesn't mean you have to pay them more than anyone else. But if you keep them happy, to take care of them, I'm sure it will take care of itself.
That was brilliant, Bart. Bart, do you think we are moving towards a more cross-disciplinary payroll function that requires hybrid expertise?
You mean cross with HR or cross with finance or?
Yes, cross with finance and other departments.
Well, listen, and I'm a payroll person, so I'm biased. I think payroll people typically know what needs to be known from an HR perspective and know what needs to be known from a finance perspective. So I already think payroll people are as hybrid, as diverse as it can get, So not everybody, but most people do. I do believe that data, and specifically if you think about it from an AI perspective, data becomes irrespective of the organization. So it's not like data now moves over the cross line of HR towards payroll. No, the data doesn't know where it is. It's data. And if you provide your name through the recruitment process to an HR person, to a recruiter, that name will be there forever across all the other systems. So I don't think there's going to be, from a data perspective, I don't think there's going to be any department differentiating anymore.
Okay. How can teams ensure transparency without compromising privacy?
Transparency around data.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess the right answer is you need to make sure that not everybody sees the information, but still has access to it, access to what they need. But nowadays with the GDPR rules and the GDPR laws, it is becoming increasingly more difficult. In my opinion, you should have a team that handles HR, payroll, and finance team that handles jointly the same set of data, and who all have access to the same set of data by ensuring they have the right level of NDAs, they have the right level of agreements, and they have the right level of training in order to understand what data they can and cannot share across any other organization. On the other hand, I also believe there's enough tools nowadays, again, even AI again, that you could say, listen, here's a report. I want you to mask the report to such a level that it's not identifiable data anymore, but still somebody can identify to which department it belongs. So think about a GL file. And I think I can make it up, so it should be able to be done. And I think it is already probably happening. So from that perspective, I still believe it helps everybody to be transparent without losing the security of the data.
Do you see any innovations happening in payroll data security?
That's a great question. Lately, I've not seen much other than similar to what I said before, there's GPCP. So any middleware that helps you navigate data from and to and back. I think just the sheer fact that your data is becoming more accessible and is becoming more easier to translate and to navigate between the different tools, I think in itself is already an innovation that I believe is helping focus on making it more secure. Now, whether there's the focus is on making it completely, I don't know. I must admit, no. The answer is no. But I'm trying to make up with what is a bit of on the sidelines already happening. Yeah.
How do you think payroll leaders should prepare for future compliance challenges?
And then I guess you mean compliance towards the data privacy again, or the compliance towards the local compliance of rules?
It could be everything. It could be cross-border data management. It could be brand privacy. Yes.
I think automation. If you have a robot or an AI, or you have a middleware, and you can put in those parameters and say as soon as this data starts crossing certain boundaries, or as soon as this data, somebody who has an address in France and then suddenly is receiving some specific to Germany, etc., we want you to put parameters against it. I think that just the sheer fact that reporting capability is now possible allows you to ensure that you're way more compliant with all the rules. Now, the rules itself still need to be designed. The rules itself still need to be created in the tools that you have. But I think it is easier to maintain it in a tool than it is to maintain it in spreadsheets or in Word documents or in checklists.
Let's talk a little about environment, social, and governance perspective. How can payroll operations align with broader ESG goals, such as reducing environmental impact or ensuring pay equality?
I think giving access to that data and having access across the country, across the company is the one thing that helps it. Because if you can easily see with one click at the button of how's your mix of and who's doing what job and what are they being paid and why are they being paid differently, and also taking into consideration cost of living and all sorts of things. But at least having access to that data in a singular database already gives you the opportunity to report on it. And I think many organizations probably don't even know how to report on ESG because they do not have the data in one specific place. They have the data across many different tools. And so trying to report on that is going to be extremely difficult. How then to treat it and how then to ensure that it's all equal and it's all accurate, I guess that's just something for the policymakers in HR to determine how to deal with that.
What steps can companies take now in order to build a more ethical, responsible payroll practice?
Yeah, for me, ethical means the ethical element of payroll is realizing what I said earlier, realizing that your job as payroll in an organization is to ensure that people get paid correctly and timely and fairly. And so whatever the situation, you always have to come up with a solution that does not further deteriorate the issue of the employee within reason. And so for me, the most ethical thing you can do is to take that in consideration and to always assume that the employee needs to be helped with the solution instead of it needs to be a solution that saves money or saves anything. Because as I said before, If the employee doesn't get paid, then their children don't eat. Their children don't get the children can't go to school, not go to the football matches, or the mortgage cannot be paid. There's all sorts of downstream hardships that are impacted because of it. And so for me, the most ethical thing is to pay people fairly, timely, and accurately.
How do you think companies should evaluate and future proof their vendor choices?
Any organization, especially when they're on the verge of making a decision on how they're going to strategize moving forward, needs to first ask themselves, how do I want to organize myself? If you want to be HR and payroll local, and you have people locally using a local vendor, speaking the language, understanding all the rules, then your need for a vendor is different than when you are on a path to implement a central or decentralized organization. And I think many organizations are on this path. So assuming you want to centralize your organization, assuming you're going to pull out all the local elements of HR and payroll into a central location, it means your local service is required from a payroll vendor. Whether that payroll vendor is global, local, or regional doesn't really matter. But as long as that vendor or the vendor model can provide you with those services, then you have made the right decision. But if you choose a vendor that does not provide you the services whilst you are moving into a direction of centralization, then in the end of the day, you're going to be centralized with a central payroll vendor who doesn't provide the service locally. So who's going to take care of the local requirements? And that's why I'm saying the decision starts with deciding on how you want to organize yourself, and double click on that. Who's going to be responsible for what elements? Is it HR? Is it finance? Is it payroll? Then you need to decide which skills do you require. You need to hire these people. You need to train them. And then you navigate into a central location whilst you are embarking on a change of systems. But the system should have the right level of services, and the system should facilitate the process and the organization that you wish to achieve.
Let's talk a little bit about AI. How do you think AI is transforming payroll these days?
Well, payroll transforms, or AI transforms payroll by there's more and more tools coming around the corner. There's already a couple of great tools out there. I've named it GPCP, that's the general term for it. And I think the evolution of the GPCP tools is extremely growing fast. So what was possible a year ago is already double the size, double the possibilities nowadays. And I'm assuming it will only increase, the speed of the development will only increase over the years. So for me, and I think the elephant in the room is, will the AI impact the payroll teams? I think it will. It will impact the payroll teams towards their skills. I'm not sure it will impact the payroll teams towards the size of the organization, but it will definitely impact them on the skills. And so if you are a highly skilled individual that knows everything about a particular country and handles the data manually, then I think you have to realize that that manual element of your handling of the data is going to disappear anytime soon. So that goes back to your earlier question, is like, how can you help yourself? Well, learn to code, learn to do data analysis, learn how to navigate the systems, because that's what I think ultimately will help you retain your job, but also would help you grow your career towards the future. Because with all the automation, the payroll function will either become a human-facing function, which is customer service, or it will be a technically driven job, which is data analytics, setup of agents, fixing the agents, doing the data analysis. So those are the two things I think you have to take into consideration. Yes.
We hear a lot about talk to payroll feature. So do you think this will come into practice very soon?
Isn't it already in practice? I think it's the chatbots already exist. Yeah. And I think specifically if you see how it evolved, loading your let's say if you are a global organization, you've got 20 countries, loading your employee handbooks into your own bespoke AI system, and then having your employees ask questions towards that robot, that chatbot, to find the answers to your questions, I think already exists. And so it will only evolve, and I think it will evolve to a point that an AI robot can even tell an employee what's wrong with their payslip, why the payslip was wrong, why they're different. There's a difference in the net pay, what they need to do in order to correct this, or what they need to do in order to avoid this from moving forward. I think that's the next step, and I think it's around the corner. I think it's a matter of months that exists, if it doesn't already exist.
What do you think about blockchains, Bart? Do you see a future coming with it?
I think so. I think, listen, if you think about data privacy and you think about what would drive data privacy for individuals, then I think blockchain is the answer. Today, the typical employee, when they onboard in a company, they have to provide the same data 5 times at least. Tomorrow you could say, hey, as an employee, hey, I've listed with this blockchain HR organization that has all my data. You tell them what data you need, and they'll send you whatever the specific information is that you only need. You don't have to know all the specifics. You just need to get that parameter, and then it could become a something that protects every individual from their own data, and it doesn't it ensures that not every organization needs to retain and keep all that data in their own databases. Now, whether the big data organizations like this, or whether a lot of marketing organizations like this method, is a whole different discussion. But if you look at it purely from a data security perspective, it would definitely make sense.
Okay. Before we wrap up the session, we have a few closing thoughts to ask you. One would be, what's one future payroll trend that you think is being overlooked today but could be game-changing tomorrow?
I think daily pay. I think gig economy, daily pay. Why would not everybody who you start your day, you end your day, end of the day, you get your money? Why not? Or you work a couple of hours here, you work a couple of hours there, you get your money, you go home with your money in your pocket. Why not? With the technology that is being developed, this should be something that will happen. Now, whether people want this or whether everybody wants this, I can imagine younger people would like this. I can imagine more seasoned, more senior people that are a bit more advanced in their career and in their life cycle, they might not be too worried about it. But in the end of the day, the reality today is you work for a month and then you get paid. And that's a little bit like, nowadays, that's a little funny in light of what you see happening across all the other features. You want a taxi, you call an Uber. You want food, you ask Uber Eats. And I don't want to advocate Uber here, but you know what I mean. It's like everything is instant except your pay. Why is that?
Yes, that's an intriguing thought to put in our heads.
Yeah.
But looking down the road, like maybe 20 to 30 years ago, do you envision a world where payroll is fully autonomous, or will human oversight always play a role?
I think human oversight will always play a role. It's almost like the ethical question, I don't think robots can make all the decisions. I don't think robots can make, if you teach a robot to make a decision of a majority, then what's a majority, and how do you envision, the ethical side of things? So from an ethical perspective, I believe there was always going to be people in payroll. There's always going to be a human element. But yeah, it's a question of how many and for what. And that's something that's going to evolve over the next couple of years, and I think it's going faster than anyone thinks. So taking that into consideration, any organization needs to ask themselves today, where's your data today, and how much access do you have to this data? Do you have access to your own data, or do you need to jump to so many hoops before you can get to your data? Ask you your question that, and if your answer is, I don't know where my data is, then your future is way longer away from you then when you can say, oh no, I know exactly where my data is and I can access it instantly, then your ability to improve with AI is instant, and anything in between. So that's the question I would ask myself if I was an organization dealing with this question.
Finally, for leaders just starting the transformative journey in payroll, what's your advice on where to begin?
Start with your design of how you want your organization to look. You know, many organizations, they try to fix the issues they see in the payroll. They try to fix the retention issues they have in their payroll, or they still have discussions about roles and responsibilities between HR and payroll. So start there. Start with, okay, if we want a process that helps HR being HR and helps payroll being payroll, if you want a process that's more automated, if we want a process that does not need us to have people on the ground, design your organization, design your processes, and then determine your requirements for your system. And if you do it that way, and we can obviously help you with that, but if you do it that way, then at least your requirements will be based upon your real needs instead of your expectations that your systems will fix all your issues, which is obviously something that is not going to happen. So, drive your decision by requirements, and those requirements are coming from your process and your organization.
And that wraps up today's conversation on the next era of payroll, a time with strategy, technology, and leadership coverage to shape a smarter, more responsive future of work. Thank you, Bart. That was lovely chatting with you. Wishing you again a happy Global Payroll Week. Looking
Thank you.
for future conversations.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
From mindset shifts to meaningful innovation, we've uncovered how payroll professionals are stepping into roles of real influence and impact. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, keep leading, keep transforming, and keep building the future of payroll one bold step at a time. This is Nancy signing off from the Payroll Tech Toast, where the next era of payroll is always front and center.
You've been listening to the Payroll Tech Toast, a special limited podcast series brought to you by Neeyamo in celebration of Global Payroll Week. To enjoy all episodes and more exclusive content, visit us at Neeyamo.com. Join the conversation and share your thoughts using hashtag Payroll Tech Toast and hashtag Celebrating Tech Behind Pay. Thanks for tuning in, and here's to the technology powering every paycheck, everywhere.